Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano, and I'm going to tell you about the biggest sports science hack that I personally believe many athletes are going to be using 10 years from now. So basically, this is something that I think is very far ahead of time. Okay, it's way in the early production right now, but what that is metabolic flexibility. So perhaps you've heard about metabolic flexibility, but I'm going to explain a little hacking technique that is derived from metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility is a requirement, okay? It is a prerequisite in order to achieve this little technique I'm going to explain in the video. But this hack for athletes and fitness-minded people, bodybuilders, any professional athletes, the hack I think they're going to be using is derivative from that, and it's much more dense and complicated, and I'm going to explain it after I roll my intro. So, if you're familiar with metabolic flexibility, it's probably because you're familiar with keto dieting, basic principles, and intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting, basic principles. Essentially, I'm going to make this very easy to understand, very bite-sized, okay? So even if you don't know anything about this, my goal is to make these advanced concepts approachable even to people who are just getting into the whole fitness and bodybuilding conscious ideas, okay? Your energy sources, primarily in your body, carbohydrates and fats, okay? Many people will say that the body prefers carbs. This is completely false. That one I will say with a hard stop. The body prefers fats, okay? Basic arguments, which I throw out all the time to prove this, are A, your brain is made almost entirely of fat. B, and perhaps really it should be A, your body stores dramatically more fat than it does carb. Your body stores about 1,500, 1,600 calories worth of carb compared to seemingly endless amounts of fat, okay? Why would your body store unlimited amounts of an energy source which it doesn't prefer using? It's obviously your body is obviously going to store what it wants to have the most in the event of a famine, which is a slow burning but still effective and powerful fat energy source, which is also capable of holding on to nutrients and binding to toxins to prevent them from getting into your body. So fat is much more dense of a topic, but it's honestly much more like an organ which your body is constantly interacting with, especially through the hormone leptin, which you don't hear about that often because there's no pharmaceuticals that can influence leptin. The only thing that can is diet, and particularly the ketogenic diet, which is something I'm a big fan of. I've been doing it for 7 years, and I say that in almost every video because if you're new here, you have to know that because many other sources on the internet about keto just don't cut it for me. So, with performance and mixing of these two fuel sources, how do you achieve that? Well, many of us are already able to handle carbohydrates smoothly enough. If you're athletic, you have a good handle on your carbohydrate metabolism to make things easy to understand. Now, in order to tap into fat as a fuel source, you have to do some sort of ketogenic dieting. Now, don't twist that. It doesn't mean you have to do keto dieting. Like, you personally, you can do whatever you like. But in order to achieve metabolic flexibility and these biohacking techniques, which I'm talking about, and which I believe will be much more popular in 10 years, you would have to do ketogenic dieting. Or you could take a specific keto supplement, which isn't as popular nowadays, but it might be in 10 years, but I'll get into that. So keto dieting, basically, low carb diet, okay? People say it has to be high fat. People say you have to have endless amounts of olive oil. All BS. All you have to do is cut out carbohydrates. That is the only requirement to be in the ketogenic state. This is the state where your body starts making ketones and it starts using fatty acids as fuel. From there, your body gets very good, and I mean very good, at using those fatty acids and ketones for your brain and your body as time goes on. Basically, after 4 weeks at least, you can become fat adapted. Which basically means, even though you can burn more fat and it's a useful fat loss tool, many people get that twisted. It's more so about your body's ability to produce glycogen, which is carb energy, from excess protein and a little bit of glycerol, which is the backbone of fats. And it's also about your body's ability to supply fuel to your brain constantly, which is why my speech is pretty smooth throughout videos, despite it being like, 2:42 a.m. Long day at work, 2 jobs. Anyways, maybe I need to sleep soon. Bottom line, it's about constant fuel to your brain and constant fuel for your body. This is what fat adaptation does, and it allows your body to thrive under circumstances where carbohydrate energy is not prevalent, which is huge because if you think about our metabolism in an evolutionary context, carbohydrates were not available year-round. In fact, I'm one of the mind to believe that our metabolism is seasonal. It's very clear to me that ketogenic dieting and ketogenic metabolism is much more suited for half the year in winter when virtually no carbohydrates grow. The other half of the year is when our body's meant to stock up for the winter, where the metabolism again will enter its preservation mode, okay? It's not starvation mode, that's complete BS. It's preservation mode, and that's exactly what it is. It helps your body to thrive in situations where there's lower food available, particularly food that is more insulinogenic, being carbohydrates, which is more likely to produce a fat storage effect. So that is the gist of fat adaptation and the context behind some of those fuel sources. So that's how you get fat adapted, and from there, of course, if you start to eat some carbs again, your body will be like, holy shit, it's been a long time since we've had some carbs. Let's use this, right? Let's use this immediately. So, of course, the carb type matters, and that's topics for other videos. You can watch on mine. The carb type matters, and you don't want to overdo this because, your blood sugar has just been stabilized for the period of time that you've not been consuming carbohydrates, except from green vegetables, basically. And you don't want to jack up your blood sugar and have just all the pies in the world, okay? You don't want to do that. That's going to cause a lot of insulin problems, and you'll probably feel like crap for a day or two. So don't do that, especially for somebody with any sort of blood sugar dysregulation or insulin dysregulation. So don't do any of that. But if you start eating carbs like a normal human being and not like an ogre, which I've done before, so don't, feel guilty if you do, just move forward and keep going. If you start eating humane amounts of carbohydrates, your body can use them effectively. And this is the other side of the coin of fat adaptation, because when your body gets really good at using fat as a fuel, as a byproduct of that, it has to get very good at using carbs, because your body is in a state where it's not able to anticipate a large amount of carbohydrates coming in. So anything that does come in is going to be used and burned very efficiently. It's not going to want to, be wasteful, okay? So, especially because your body, in one way or another, is concerned that you may be in a famine-like situation. Doesn't mean that you're in that situation. Doesn't mean that your body thinks it's in starvation mode, but it is in a conservative mode, okay? So, from this point on, what are the techniques that athletes are going to be using? Okay, the techniques are supplementation to basically amplify both of the prevalence of these fuel sources, and also the keto dieting with strategic carbohydrate manipulation. So essentially, for the supplementation side of things, we have the very cool military tested ketone supplements. Okay, you can find ketone salts online, but the real deal is the ketone esters. So these are liquid ketone supplements, not powdered, and basically they aren't attached to salt, because oftentimes the ketone salts, which are commonly available nowadays, are ketones attached to salt in order to lower their acidity so that you can actually consume them. The esters, which are these liquids, put you in deep ketosis right away. And these were actually tested by DARPA for military purposes. You can watch my video on this real super soldier serum, because that's literally what this is. It was literally tested as part of the metabolic dominance program to see if they could create super soldiers who had constant availability of fuel for their brain and body. That constant stream of fuel would come from fatty acids systemically, okay? Fatty acids would basically be, as a byproduct of fat adaptation, they're always available for muscle tissue to be using. And from there, ketones, basically 75% of them are going straight to your brain. So essentially, for a lot of people, even if you've watched other sports science pages or anything like that, you may have heard about studies where people can gas out when they're doing certain athletic activities, not because they run out of glycogen fuel, but simply because their blood sugar drops to the point where, because they're not able to thrive and their body isn't trained in situations of low glucose, their body taps out and they mentally hit a wall. Okay? So part of the reasoning that these tests were done in a military context was because the constant availability of fuel allows a soldier or any athlete to thrive even when glucose is getting low, and allows you to hit a lower threshold basically before your mind wants you to tap out. This is very common for endurance athletes like marathon runners, super triathletes, okay? What they're even doing is taking these ketone esters and using them like a Gatorade, basically sipping on them little bits here and there. So the practical ways for you to apply this right now are, of course, experimenting with ketogenic dieting. And you can, so the way I was saying you could get fat adapted through just supplementation would be large amounts of ketone esters. Now, that's very expensive, like literally hundreds of dollars, closer to thousands, depending on how long you're using this for. And you have to be careful because these things can have a dramatic impact on your blood sugar, and you don't want to dramatically change anything. This is why ketone salts, which I was referring to earlier, may be a better short-term option for experimenting with these things. However, they do vary in quality. So, as far as supplementing nowadays and getting your body used to this metabolic flexibility, supplementing with ketone salts is a great way to start. Supplementing with MCT oil is a great way to start. Get a good quality one, because it can upset your stomach if you don't. By good quality, look for ones that say C8 on them. That's a type of MCT that's very efficiently used by the body and doesn't cause as much GI upset. So, now we're talking about the other side of the coin, which is strategic carb use, okay? When it comes to strategic carb use, there's two main methods. There's targeted carbs and there's carb backloading. Basically, these both surround workout times, and you're essentially filling up your carb fuel, right? The bench of your carb players, and you're getting these guys ready because carbs, the fundamental dichotomy of these two energy sources is carbohydrates are very quick. They're an emergency fuel, but they kind of come at a cost because they're really not meant to be the fuel we're running on all the time. We're actually, I believe, meant to be bouncing around between these two states, and doing either one year-round it could be problematic. I mean, we certainly know some theories behind long-term huge amounts of carbs. It could mess with your blood sugar and blood insulin. Long-term keto isn't as studied as much, but I'd imagine that a balance between the two is always optimal. I certainly have been eating keto for 7 years, but I bounce in and out of ketosis strategically with carbs here and there. And this is why I'm going to be making more videos on this, because I think that's very practical, and I think a lot more bodybuilders and fitness type people need to be doing this. So, back to the hack that all these athletes are going to be using. If you think of the best athletes right now, they're very powerful, okay? They're very lean. If you pick even just one sport, right? Soccer, Ronaldo. Basketball, LeBron. You could keep going with these athletes that are very physically dominant, and they have the explosive power through the carbohydrate type energy, the glycogen, and they also have the endurance capabilities, right? The consistency, which are characteristics of a consistent fuel source with less variability, and that mental endurance, which is a lot easier to achieve if you are fueling your mind correctly. Okay, if you know anything about the biohacking side of things, you know that your brain functions very optimally with fat as a fuel source. And as somebody who preaches a lot of the ketogenic dieting methods, this doesn't mean you have to go nuts having shitloads of fat, okay? Keto simply means don't eat sugar, okay? You can do whatever else you want from there, and you can hit whatever macro ratio you want from any of the foods, as long as there's no sugar, no carbs, no starches. So that is a requirement to get in this state of metabolic flexibility. But I have other videos on my page about keto and the Krebs cycle, okay? Basically, your body takes only 3 steps or so to create ATP, which is energy, from fats or beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is a ketone. Well, it's not technically a ketone, but it acts like one in your body. So, when you compare that to the 26 steps that require ATP to be produced from carbohydrate metabolism, basically, you have a significantly larger amount of steps. I might be off by 1 or 2 steps on those, but either way, the amount of conversion required to create ATP from carbohydrate is a lot more wasteful. You're creating more oxidative stress, and it's not as smooth. According to Dr. Picard, who's an expert on mitochondria, your mitochondria loves to churn fat. It's a perfect fuel for your mitochondria. And when we're talking about very extreme athletics, whatever is going to be smoother, especially by such a huge margin, is going to be way more effective when we're talking about performance. Okay, this is a cellular level where you're amplifying the amount of energy that your body is able to produce and prevent wasting. Okay, that's a pretty big thing too, because it's not just about how much you consume, it's about how efficiently you can use it and prevent having to have excess cleanup, which is also going to cause less inflammation. So it all plays into this process of, performing better, but recovering better, which will allow you to perform better, which the cycle continues and the results compound. So this is also partly why I'm so adamant on the combination between the two, and why I want to be the guy who is ahead of all this, especially in the bodybuilding side of things, or in the fitness world side of things, because, we're not all LeBron James, but you can watch my video on LeBron James doing keto diets, because he actually did one, but I don't believe he's the type to do it during the season, but it certainly may have enhanced his ability to perform. So we're not all LeBron Jameses, but you can certainly reach a similar standard in relation to your performance levels that you've experienced in your life. You can experience that you're at your own personal LeBron James level by messing around with these techniques. You can achieve that you're at a much higher standard of play if you do a sport. Your lifting performance will go up, and your body composition will also be dramatically impacted in a positive way if you're able to manipulate these carbohydrates, okay? The beauty of it all is that the gateway into all this is keto dieting. So it'll help you kick your addiction to food, especially to sugar, and from there, if you watch anybody who takes keto seriously on YouTube, you'll see that they treat it like a tool, okay? This is a tool for your brain, it's a tool for your lifestyle, and a lot of people find very functional, high-performance lifestyles to revolve around a ketogenic diet, and that is certainly what I preach myself. So the biggest hack and how it applies to you is start messing around with ketogenic dieting. Watch more of my videos, of course, but the real takeaway is once you are well-versed enough to know how keto works, MCT oils are beneficial, but ketone salts, and more importantly, ketone esters, particularly one I think is best called Ketone Aid, are dramatically going to make everything easier, and they're also going to allow you to hit levels of sports performance that you probably never experienced before. But you want your body to have a mix of both types of fuel. So you could do what I do on some occasions, which is get a high quality carbohydrate supplement. So this is Carb. This is just, you don't have to get this one, but the beauty of it is you can use a quick digesting carb strategically, and you can use it around workout performance. You can watch my video on targeted ketogenic dieting to learn more about that, but you can use it, and that's the easiest gateway into all this. Start keto and then start using strategic carb buildups, okay? Either before or after workout. And then the lifestyle approach to all this is, maybe you won't have to buy a carb supplement, right? You don't have to buy the most expensive one. You can buy a cheaper one, like this one I have here, unnecessarily, just pure dextrose. And from there, the real practicality is, you don't have to buy a dextrose or a simple sugar. You can just eat a enjoyable meal. And over time, you'll learn about which types of carbs are better for this, particularly nut fruits, quicker digesting carbs, because you want them to get into your muscles right away, and you don't want them to store in your liver. So there's other little caveats that come with this. But the technique that I personally believe, and there's a quote from Mark Sisson, who is very popular for being known for like the paleo pioneer, and that quote is essentially that he predicts that eventually when the world sees a crazy level athlete on an endurance level, but also high explosive type sport, so like a triathlon type thing, he quoted that he believed it would be one with a ketogenic metabolism or a flexible metabolism, basically. That's one of his predictions, and I certainly agree. We have lots of incredible athletes now, but I believe the ones who are truly going to start being ridiculously advanced are the ones who are going to be combining these techniques, okay? And if you're somebody who is into more of the golden era training stuff too, and you'll see that I talk about Vince Gironda quite a bit every now and then, this guy was certainly on it. And if you look at even an example as a case study, the classic era of bodybuilders, a lot of these guys were bouncing around between fat metabolism and carb metabolism. A lot of them are nowadays too, but there's more of an emphasis on keeping the carbs in place. There's not as much carb restriction, and if we want to look at an example, I mean, you could pick 1 out of every 5 bodybuilders from that generation, and they were manipulating carbohydrates. Arnold, Larry Scott, anybody trained by Gironda was manipulating their carbohydrates in one way or another, and it generally seemed to be a principle of that time period. People tended to look at just protein as the main muscle builder. Carbohydrates were simply a strategic fuel source, which is how you should look at them. So that's it. This was a long video, but I wanted to introduce your mind to these concepts. Introduce your mind to the concepts of strategic ketone supplementation, strategic carbohydrate manipulation, saying things in a cool way that makes them rhyme, and just saying that so you remember this, okay? Because you need to remember the interplay between these two states of your metabolism are where the true powerful benefits start to reveal themselves. That's it for this one. Ask me questions in the comments. A suggestion may be about metabolic flexibility. You can go watch my video on the Super Soldier Serum, which is basically ketone esters developed by DARPA. Targeted keto video is also a great one if you want to learn more about these carb manipulation techniques. And I also have videos showing my workouts, other things you can achieve when bouncing around between a metabolically flexible state. That's it. Anthony Romano, peace.